The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Zielik. I am with ICF, and we are the vendor working on behalf of the sponsors of Energize Connecticut to bring these passive house and all-electric homes trainings to all of you. So thanks for joining us today. These trainings are at no cost thanks to the sponsors of Energize Connecticut and are part of a partnership with Connecticut Passive House and Build Green Connecticut. Today's training will be recorded and will be available online afterwards. A reminder that as part of this training and workforce development initiative, we are offering a 75% cost reimbursement for individuals pursuing either FIAS or PHI professional accreditation. So this includes the cost of the training and the exam. And once you become certified, we'll work with you to process the 75% cost reimbursement. So if you have any questions on that, please do not hesitate to contact us. With that, I will pass it over to Keegan Ebbets, who is also with ICF, to talk about the passive house and all-electric home building incentives.
Thanks, Anna, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So in addition to this no-cost educational training series and the professional accreditation reimbursements, the sponsors of Energize Connecticut also offer robust incentives for builders and developers who choose to go all-electric with their residential buildings or pursue passive house certification in multifamily projects with 5 units or more. Michael, next slide. The passive house incentive design for the Energize Connecticut program is shown here and includes pre-construction incentives for things like feasibility studies and energy modeling, and post-construction incentives for full passive house certification. On the all-electric incentive, if you want to go to the next slide, is for both single-family and multifamily buildings and has 2 levels of eligibility with specific design and performance requirements associated for each, with incentive amounts ranging from $1,500 a unit for multifamily up to $10,000 for single-family homes. Ultimately, our goal is for everyone involved in the construction of residential buildings in the state of Connecticut to be aware of these incentives. So if you're interested in learning more, please visit the Energize Connecticut website or contact us directly. And as for questions throughout today's session, use the chat function on the GoToWebinar control panel. And this session is also approved for CEUs, IECC, AIA, BPI, and ResNet, which we will follow up with everyone in attendance today afterwards. So with that, I will turn it over to our speakers today, Michael Rossi and Bill Dieters from PSD Consulting. Hi guys, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Keegan. Thanks so much. So my name is Michael Rossi. I'm an energy code specialist with PSD. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Bill Dieters, as well as Sunaina Jain, who are going to be on the call available to answer questions in the chat while I present. Thanks so much. So welcome to today's presentation, where we'll provide an overview of the key residential changes to the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC. Please note that this presentation is not intended to provide a comprehensive look at all of the new changes, but just highlight the most important information. The presentation also does not cover the requirements for the simulated building performance path in section R405 of the code. And for full list of changes, please reference the code itself. We also want to reiterate that these changes are model code and do not include any state-specific or local amendments. The code's not applicable to jurisdictions unless specifically adopted, and jurisdictions can choose to adopt the code in part or in full, and can also make changes or amendments as they see fit. So with that all being said, let's get started. So the International Code Council updated the intent of the code in section R101.3. One notable change is providing optional templates for model code language to support jurisdictional goals of achieving zero energy buildings. The model code language I referenced on the previous slide can be found in the code's appendices section. The 2021 IECC only had 3 appendices, RA, RB, and RC, which were for Board of Appeals, solar readiness, and zero energy provisions. But the 2024 IECC actually adds 9 new appendices, along with additional guidance to achieve all electric residential buildings in resource RRA. So as you can see, these appendices include topics like energy storage, electrical vehicle charging, all electric ready buildings, operational carbon, demand responsive controls, and model code language for a stretch energy code. And so a full list of the appendices can be found on this slide. All right, section R103 provides a framework for jurisdictions who want to develop code enforcement mechanisms by establishing language to create an authority having jurisdiction, otherwise known as an AHJ, which is essentially a governing body to enforce the code. The code also presents new guidelines in section R107.4 for third-party testing. The code official can accept reports from third-party inspection agencies if they're not affiliated with the building design or construction, as long as they're qualified to inspect the building components or systems being tested, and approval is given ahead of time before the building permit is issued. So in the next couple of slides, we'll outline new and updated definitions that can be found in the code in Chapter 2. When information is italicized in the code, it means that there's a definition that corresponds to the word being referenced. And the code provides these definitions to maintain consistency in how the information is being presented. So here's a full list of all of the new definitions described. And you'll notice some interesting ones here. There's specifically relating to energy rating index and things like that. So there are some new definitions in the code that are specific to the 24. So one big note is that the 2024 IECC revises the requirements for additional energy efficiency. Previously, the 2021 IECC had information in section R401.2.5, which required compliance with a list of energy efficiency package options for all compliance paths. The 2024 IECC actually removes this subsection, and the additional efficiency requirements can be found in section R408. But these requirements only apply to buildings following the prescriptive compliance option and not those using the simulated compliance path or the energy rating index path. All right, new guidelines have also been added to the code for unit sampling, which apply to multifamily buildings that want to take a representative sample of tests without testing every single unit. This can be beneficial when there's a significant number of identical units or units that have similar characteristics in the building, where the inspector can save significant time on site. Unit sampling can be performed for air leakage testing, duct leakage testing, or mechanical ventilation system testing. Please note that some incentives or rebate programs may not allow for unit sampling, so be sure to check with your state-specific requirements to determine eligibility. So for unit sampling, if there are less than 8 units, sampling cannot be performed, and each unit must be tested. If there are 8 or more units in a building, 7 units or 20%, whichever is greater, must be tested. The tested units must include one on the top floor, the ground floor, and the middle floor, and also include the unit with the largest testing unit enclosure area. If a unit fails and is above the maximum rate allowed, corrective actions must be taken, and the unit must be retested until it passes. For each unit that fails, 3 additional units need to be tested, including the corrected one. All right, a new update is a permanently installed certificate with information about the building has been required in the code, and the 2024 IECC actually just adds a couple of additional requirements to the certificate, which include the location and dimensions of a solar-ready zone if it's applicable, and the additional efficiency measure selected for compliance with the section R408 if it's following the prescriptive path. So a big note is that there were several significant changes to the prescriptive installation requirements in the code. This slide notes some of the changes for climate zones 4 through 6. And most notably, there was a reduction in the ceiling R value required, which was moving from an R60 in the 2021 IECC back to an R49, which was the level that was required for the 2018 IECC. This requirement changed as part of negotiations by the Consensus Committee, who were responsible for developing the code. There were also changes in requirements for skylights and new options for floors to use continuous insulation. Additionally, the table with the insulation requirements in section R402.1.3 was also distinguishes between heated and unheated slabs. All right, it's important to note that the structure of both table R402.1.2 and R402.1.3 have been reorganized. In the 2021 IECC, the climate zones noted going down the table in green, and the envelope components were shown going across the table in orange. This was flipped in the 2024 IECC, so now the envelope components are going down the table in orange, and the climate zones are going across the table in green, as described in this graphic. So overall, just a new reorganization of the way the information is described. The information for the most part is the same, except for the changes that were noted, but just a new way of reorganizing what it looks like here. All right, equation 4.1 for the envelope component performance alternative was also adjusted, where the proposed values must be stricter than the prescriptive insulation values in table R402.1.2. This equation now factors in the F factor for slabs, which was previously not a part of the previous code. So now there's an adjustment to the performance alternative that looks at slabs where it wasn't provided previously. All right, so the requirements in the code in section R402.1.2, which is ceilings for attics, have been adjusted and updated to reflect less stringent prescriptive insulation levels for the attic. And there's also a new guidance in the code for attic knee walls to have an air barrier that separates conditioned from unconditioned space. And knee walls must be insulated to the same prescriptive R values as the wood-framed walls in table R402.1.3. So for floor installation criteria in table R402.5.1.1 now directly points to the code section R402.2.8 rather than having the guidance noted in the table. The information in this section is simplified, where it notes that floors must be air sealed to prescriptive insulation levels in manufacturer's instructions and shall be air sealed to maintain a continuous air barrier. As we'll see in the next slide in more detail, the section also adds options for continuous insulation. So as noted, the previous code guidance for the section in the 2021 IECC was moved to item 3, where items 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 include existing language that has been shifted. Item 3.4 here, however, is new guidance that aligns with the new options to use continuous insulation only for floors in the prescriptive table, and requires that continuous insulation is installed to maintain contact with the upper side of the structural floor system and extend from the bottom to the top of all perimeter floor framing members. The guidance for slabs is also slightly updated in the 2024 IECC, where it now delineates between the prescriptive requirements and the performance requirements, provides clarification for existing language, and provides new guidance to differentiate between heated and unheated slabs, where full slab insulation needs to be continuous under the entire area of the slab on grade floor. And for heated slabs, slab insulation isn't required to extend below the bottom of the heated slab and must be continuous with the full slab insulation. So according to the United States Department of Energy, radiant barriers are typically installed in attics primarily to reduce summer heat gain and reduce cooling costs. The barriers consist of a highly reflective material that reflects radiant heat rather than absorbing it. Radiant barriers are commonly found in homes in hot climates. The code guidance the code adds guidance for radiant barriers to be installed in accordance with ASTM C1743. Now, these systems are probably likely not to be included in Connecticut, but we just wanted to reference them here. So there's also some new updated air sealing guidance for fireplaces, where they must have an air barrier and insulated. These requirements were combined with the previous guidance that was provided for showers and tubs, which notes that an air barrier shall separate insulation in the building thermal envelope from the shower, tub, or fireplace assemblies. And for installation, exterior framed walls adjacent to showers, tubs, and fireplaces shall be insulated. So as I mentioned in the 2021 IECC, this guidance was the same for showers and tubs. Fireplaces were just added to follow the similar guidance here. All right, the air sealing requirements also adds a section for common walls and double walls that separate the two dwelling units. An interior air barrier must be provided and air sealing is required at the interior walls that separate the units. So as noted, the air barriering and air sealing criteria for here, our interior air barrier shall be provided. Air sealing at the intersection with building thermal envelope shall be provided. Where installed in the fire resistance rated wall assembly, air sealing materials shall comply with one of the following: be in accordance with the approved design for the fire resistance rated assembly, or be supported by an approved data that shows the assembly as installed complies with the required fire resistance rating. And the installation criteria for this is that insulation materials recognized in the approved common wall or double wall design and installed in accordance with the approved design shall be permitted to be used. So here's just new guidance in the code for the common walls and double walls. All right, so the maximum air leakage rate for buildings depends on if you're following the prescriptive requirements or the performance requirements. If you're following the prescriptive requirements, climate zones 3 through 5 remain at 3 air changes per hour at 50 pascals, or ACH 50, whereas climate zones 6 through 8 have reduced the air leakage requirements to 2.5 air changes per hour at 50 pascals, or ACH 50. If you're following the performance path, the air leakage requirements have changed from 5 air changes per hour to 4 changes per hour, or 0.22 cubic feet per minute, or CFM, per square foot of building thermal envelope or a dwelling unit enclosure area. The exception for testing has been restructured, but a big change is that the air leakage for the exception moves from 0.30 CFM per square feet to 0.27 CFM per square feet for attached or R2 occupancies in buildings with less than 1,500 square foot of conditioned floor area. Exception 1 adds different testing parameters when performing guarded versus compartmentalization testing. All right, so the air sealing guidance for electrical and communication outlet boxes has been expanded in the 2024 IECC. Instead of just noting that the air barrier must be installed behind electrical and communication boxes, or the building must be air sealed, instead of just noting that the air barrier must be installed behind electrical and communication boxes, or the building must use air sealed boxes like in the 2021 IECC, the new code elaborates on what to do when the box penetrates the air barrier, where the box must be caulked, taped, gasketed, or otherwise sealed to the air barrier element being penetrated, be buried in or surrounded by insulation, be tested and marked in accordance with NEMA OS 4, and be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. The air sealing criteria in table R402.5.1.1 also points to this new section, and the code adds installation criteria. So as noted, table R402.5.1.1 notes that for air sealing criteria, boxes, housing, and enclosures that penetrate the air barrier shall be caulked, taped, gasketed, or otherwise sealed to the air barrier element being penetrated. All concealed openings into the box, housing, or enclosure shall be sealed. Alternatively, air sealed boxes shall be installed in accordance with section R402.5.5, which is the guidance shown on the slide. And then for installation, boxes, housing, enclosures shall be buried in and surrounded by insulation. So now we're moving on to the requirements in section R403, which is for systems. So this requirement for R403.1.2 heat pump supplementary heat, the code had previously provided guidance when less efficient electric resistance heating system could be used to supplement the heat provided by more efficient heat pumps in certain situations when the heat pump can't meet the heating load. The 2024 IECC expands this requirement to add the options for dual fuel heating systems using fuel gas or liquid fuel, in addition to the electric resistance systems, to supplement the heat when needed. So fuel gas is defined as a natural gas, manufactured gas, liquid petroleum gas, or a mixture of these, and liquid fuel is a fuel oil or biodiesel blend. So the code also specifies when supplemental heat operation can take place, specifically when the vapor cycle can't provide the necessary heating to satisfy the thermostat settings, when the heat pump is in defrost mode, when the vapor compression cycle malfunctions, or when the thermostat malfunctions. Now let's take a look at the requirements for duct systems. First, new definitions have been added to the code for a duct system and duct work, which have replaced previous references to ducts throughout the section. Next, a new exception was added for ventilation ductwork that is not integrated with duct systems serving heating or cooling systems, which previously applied only to testing and now applies to the whole section. So this new section of the code, R403.3.1, clarifies which standard to use for duct systems that serve multiple dwelling or sleeping units. ANSI ACA Manual D applies for systems serving 1 or 2 dwelling units, whereas the ASHRAE Handbook of Fundamentals or other equivalent computational procedure can also be used for duct systems serving 2 or more units. Or sorry, more than 2 units. All right, the 2021 IECC had previously included walls and floors as separate options 3 and 4 for ducts to be considered in conditioned space. The 2024 IECC combines these requirements and adds new guidelines as per the content on the slide. So ductwork contained within wall or floor assemblies, separating the unconditioned space from conditioned space, shall comply with the following. Continuous air barrier shall be installed as part of the building assembly between the ductwork and the unconditioned space. Ductwork shall be installed in accordance with section R403.3.3, with an exception when the building assembly cavities contain ductwork that has been air sealed in accordance with section R402.5.1 and insulated in accordance with item 3.3. Duct insulation is not required. And for 3.3, not less than R10 insulation or not less than 50% of the required installation R value specified in table R402.1.3, whichever is greater, shall be located between the ductwork and the unconditioned space. Segments of ductwork contained within these building assemblies shall not be considered completely inside conditioned space for compliance with R405 or R406. Where supply and return ductwork is partially or completely buried in ceiling insulation, that ductwork must comply with the requirements noted in this section for R403.3.5 ductwork buried within ceiling insulation. The 2024 IECC adds a new fourth requirement that is noted in the slide and is applicable to moist climate zones 0 through 3. Where ductwork is installed in unvented attic with vapor diffusion ports, the supply ductwork must be completely buried within the installation floor of the attic, insulated to at least R8, and in compliance with the International Mechanical Code and International Residential Code. All right, for duct system testing, although the language in this section was updated, the requirements remain largely the same. The code did add additional guidance for what to do when registers or grills are installed and what to do when they're not installed, as noted in the slide in blue. Where installed, registers and grills must be sealed during the test, and when they are not installed, the face of the register boots shall be sealed during the test. So there are multiple new exceptions added to the code for duct system testing. First, testing is not required for ventilation ductwork that is not integrated into the heating or cooling systems. Testing is also not required when there is less than 10 feet of total ductwork external to the space conditioning equipment, when the duct system is located entirely within conditioned space, and when the ductwork does not include plenums constructed of building cavities or gypsum board. An exception also notes that when space equipment is not installed, testing is still permitted, and the total measured leakage in this case has to be less than 3 CFM per 100 square feet of conditioned floor area. The final exception is when conducting unit sampling, testing of each unit is not required. So the code adds a new section, a new table, R403.3.8, to simplify the duct leakage limits based on the conditioned floor area, the number of ducted returns, and the location of the duct system. The section also notes that when calculating leakage to outside, in addition to total duct leakage to outside value can't be used to comply with this section, but can be used as part of the performance modeling when using the simulated performance or ERI path. So essentially, when you're testing the leakage to outside, you can use that and factor that into an energy rating index through a HERS rating or similar method. Or, but that leakage to outside value can't be used to comply with this section for the prescriptive buildings here. So now looking at some water circulation systems. When circulation systems are installed, the code adds new guidance to the existing section as noted in green, where the system return pipe shall be a dedicated return pipe or cold water supply pipe. When a cold water pipe is used as the return pipe, a temperature sensor connected to the controls shall be located on the hot water supply, not more than 2 feet from the connection to the cold water supply pipe. The requirements for when demand recirculating water systems are installed remain largely unchanged, except for requirements surrounding controls to limit pump operation, which we will describe in detail in the following slide. So the controls must limit pump operation by shutting off the pump when the temperature sensor detects an increase of 10 degrees above the initial temperature of the water in the pipe, or when the temperature of the water in the pipe reaches 104 degrees. The controls must also limit pump operation after 5 minutes following the activation, and not activating the pipe for at least 5 minutes following shutoff, or when the temperature in the water pipe exceeds 104 degrees. So heater energy recovery ventilators are now required for climate zone 6. These systems bring fresh air into the home while simultaneously exhausting stale air from the inside through heat exchanger, providing a balanced ventilation system. These systems were previously only required in climate zone 7 and 8, but have expanded to include climate zone 6 in the 2024 IECC. All right, so now looking at fan efficacy for whole house mechanical ventilation systems and outdoor air ventilation systems. The table for this section, which we're going to discuss in the following slide, has been expanded to include the test procedures in addition to the airflow rate and minimum fan efficacy. So previously, the test procedures were listed in the section, but now they are, but the new procedures are added and required for different system types. So as you'll see here, the testing procedures on the far right column have been updated as per the ones listed here. And they, so that whole column to the right hadn't been included in the previous version of the code. So for ventilation system testing, the requirements have added reference to the verification procedure outlined in ANSI ResNet IECC 380. In the next slide, we'll talk about some new exceptions to ventilation system testing requirements. So the big change to testing is it said they added accordance to ANSI ResNet IECC 380 here, along with the new exceptions here. So there are 2 new exceptions to the ventilation testing requirements: when the unit sampling is used, and when the ventilation system has an integrated diagnostic tool that can measure airflow and can communicate the installed airflow rate with the user. The previous exceptions from the 2021 IECC have been updated as well, where kitchen rain hoods that are ducted to the outside with ducting having a diameter of 6 inches or larger, a length of 10 feet or less, and not more than 2 90-degree elbows or equivalent shall require testing. So for that one we talked about last, the two 90-degree elbows was changed from 1, and they added some new guidance there, and exceptions 2 and 3 were completely added and are new exceptions to the code. All right, when an exhaust system serving a bathroom or toilet room is designed for intermittent operation, the exhaust system controls shall include a timer control, an occupancy sensor control, a humidity control, or a contaminant control. Manual off functionality shall be used in lieu of a minimum set point functionality, and these requirements are exempt when the exhaust system serves an integral part of the whole house mechanical ventilation system. All right, so detached, there's new requirements here for electric resistant space heating. For detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses in climate zones 4 through 8, using electric resistant space heating must either limit the total installed heating capacity of all electric spacing equipment to less than 2 kilowatts, or install a heat pump in the largest space that is not used as a bedroom. So this just limits the amount of electric resistant space heating you can use in a home. All right, so for mechanical systems located outside the building thermal envelope, in this section, previously in the 2021 IECC, the section only included requirements for snow and ice melt system controls, but has since been expanded to include other mechanical systems which are located outside the building thermal envelope, including heating outside a building, roof and gutter de-icing controls, and freeze protection system controls. So previously R403.9 just had the snow and ice melt system controls, but now added 3 new pieces of it for when you're doing heating outside the building. All right, there also added some new requirements in R403.13 for gas fireplaces. So this new section provides guidance for gas fireplaces where they shall not be equipped with a continuous pilot and shall be equipped with an on-demand pilot, intermittent ignition, or interrupted ignition. Please note that this guidance is also applicable to gas lighting in section R404.1.5. Gas-fired appliances using pilots with listed combustion safety devices are exempt from this section's requirements. The section also covers the fireplace efficiency requirements for vented gas fireplaces and heaters and decorative appliances. So here's just some new guidance they added for the gas fireplaces here. All right, now we're going to look at some of the requirements of R404 for lighting equipment. First off, the section updates the efficacy requirements of permanently installed light lamps and luminaires and adds new exceptions for appliance lamps, antimicrobial lighting used for the sole purpose of disinfecting, general service lamps complying with DOE 10 CFR Part 430.32, and luminaires with a rated electrical input no less than 3 watts. So the guidance here was just updated slightly and just clarifies some of the specific requirements and adds the new exceptions. So the code now also distinguishes between habitable spaces and specific locations, which include spaces like garages, unfinished basements, laundry rooms, and utility rooms. Habitable spaces include a manual dimmer or automatic off shutoff control, and specific locations must have an automatic shutoff control. Both spaces must automatically turn off lights within 20 minutes after all occupants have left the space and incorporate manual controls to allow occupants to turn the lights off. Lighting for safety and security are exempt from these requirements. All right, the 2024 IECC has also added this new section for renewable energy certificate documentation, which provides guidance for renewable energy certificates. When renewable energy generation is used to comply with the code, documentation shall be provided to the code official by the property owner or owner's authorized agent, demonstrating that where renewable energy certificates or RECs or energy attributable certificates are associated with that portion of the renewable energy used to comply with the code, the RECs or EACs shall be retained or retired on behalf of the property owner. The section is also referenced when using the on-site power production as part of the energy rating index in section R406.7.3. So if you're using renewable energy to comply with the requirements for the energy rating index, you have to also use this documentation provided in this section. So now looking specifically at that energy rating index in section R406, the section now clarifies that the energy rating index path is only available to dwelling units, where spaces other than dwelling units in group R2, R3, and R4 buildings must follow the prescriptive requirements in section R402 through R404. When complying with the ERI path, there are several mandatory prescriptive requirements the project must still follow, which are noted in table R406.2. There are several updates to these requirements that we'll discuss in the next two slides. First, the requirements for additional efficiency packages in R401.2.5 have been removed because this section was deleted in favor of a new point-based credit system in R408, which is only applicable to the prescriptive path. So this is what we talked about earlier on the presentation, where the requirements are no longer applicable to the performance-based approaches, including this energy rating index path. There are also new air sealing guidance in the sections for room containing fossil fuel appliances, fuel burning appliances, slab on grade floors, the maximum air leakage rates, fireplaces and fenestration air leakage, recessed lighting, and air sealed electrical and communication outlet boxes. So some of these new sections that were added are new to the code. Other sections are new specifically to the to this table. So for example, there might have been some sections referenced here that were included in the 21 IECC, but weren't applicable to the ERI path that are now applicable. And it also adds in new sections that are applicable to the path. So following up on some of these additional requirements, the table also adds requirements for hot water boiler temperature reset in R403.2 and gas fireplaces in R403.13. Sections R403.3 and R403.5 are also now fully required for compliance, where previously there were exceptions or only portions of these sections which were applicable. So now it takes out the exceptions and just says directly what portions have to comply with the code. All right, the code also adds a new envelope backstop in section R406.3, where buildings in climate zone 0 through 2 can be 8% worse than the prescriptive insulation requirements, and buildings in climate zones 3 through 8 can be 15% worse than the prescriptive insulation requirements. And the reason being for this is that there's some added flexibility in the code when you're using this ERI path. So to accommodate that added flexibility, they gave percentages, increases of their, or percentage changes to the amount of insulation used just to help support the building professional. So if they're using a trade-off with less insulation in one place and more in another place, they can be a certain percentage worse. And in Connecticut, it'd be 15% potentially worse. And part of the reason they did this in the code was because previously what they had done was reference old code sections. So would reference older versions of the IECC and use those as the baseline. Whereas now they sort of provided a clarification by just giving a percentage in the 24 so that the requirements are more applicable here rather than referencing old codes here. So in R406.4 is some of the requirements for the energy rating index. So the 2024 IECC adds a significant major clarification to the code, which better aligns the ERI values with existing rating systems that are available, like the Residential Energy Services Network Home Energy Rating System Index, or HERS index. Previously, the ventilation rate calculations would result in different values for the energy rating index and HERS. But by adding the language as follows, the mechanical ventilation rates used for the ERI shall not be construed to establish minimum ventilation requirements for compliance with this code. Both systems are now aligned. So by adding in that little package here, it's a way to really align the ERI requirements with what's in the HERS. So now you can potentially use HERS for compliance with the code without having discrepancies. which would resulted from previous code cycles. All right, so for the requirements of what the ERIs are and the actual values, the 2024 IECC adds new requirements by looking at the ERI values before and after factoring in on-site power production. Adding new requirements to an energy model tends to provide a massive reduction in the rating index. So these requirements will ensure that the home can't just rely on on-site power production to meet the code, but must meet a certain efficiency level before it is adjusted for on-site power. So table R406.5 shows the energy rating index values before and after factoring in on-site power. Please note that the ERI values drop by 1 point in every climate zone between the 2021 IECC and 2024 IECC before factoring in the adjustment for on-site power. All right, so we talked a little bit about the new section R408 for the additional energy efficiency requirements, which is only applicable to the prescriptive path. So let's look at the new section. And as we previously noted, the code replaced additional efficiency package options with this new point-based credit system. Residential buildings following the prescriptive path need to earn 10 credits or more using 2 or more of the measures specified in table R408.2.5, R408.2. 5 additional credits are required for dwelling units with more than 5,000 square feet of living space. And let's navigate these new code requirements using the study in blue box on the right. So let's look at a builder in Philadelphia who wants to construct a 2,500 square foot new home. To meet the requirements of section R408, he wants to install an ERV, reduce air leakage to 1.5 air changes, and put 100% of the duct systems in conditioned space. First, let's determine what we need to know to make our decisions: the size of the building, the climate zone, and the efficiency requirements used for compliance. The size is needed to determine the size of, or to determine the number of credits required. The climate zone is needed to determine how many points you can earn for a particular measure, and the efficiency requirements are needed to see if the proposal is eligible for credit. Since our project is under 5,000 square feet, only 10 credits are required. You don't have to add the additional 5 credits. And we can also confirm that Philadelphia is in climate zone 4A. All right, so now let's look at the table with the credit requirements. We know which climate zone we're in, as shown in the horizontal table, and we also know which efficiency measures we want to include, as shown on the vertical table. We found the 2 measures proposed by the previous slide and want to find out how many credits each option is worth in climate zone 4. By navigating using the green boxes, we can determine that each of the proposed measures is worth 6 credits, which would give the builder 12, enough to comply. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's review the requirements for compliance with each of the measures. Please note that this slide only provides a snapshot of the credit options available in table R408.2. For a full list of options, just please refer to the full code, because these are just a list of measures for the case of this case study. There are a lot more options available in this table. All right, so the code sections noted here are the measure numbers in table R408.2. So we found the requirements associated with each measure, which is how we got to R408.2.42 and R408.2.54. Here we have the specific requirements for each credit option by the builder, or that was proposed. If the proposed design meets these requirements, they can earn credit for this category. So I'm not going to describe the requirements in particular, but just show that when you navigate the table, you find where the specific requirements are. You can determine if your proposal is going to meet these requirements, and then you can earn credits with that category. All right, so now we're going to look at the requirements for existing buildings in section R405.6 for change in spacing conditioning. This guidance was previously found in the 2021 IECC in section R405.2, but the 2024 IECC just moved it to R401.6 and removed 2 of the exceptions. So the requirements shown for changes in space conditioning is mostly the same, just moved to a different place in the code and without a couple exceptions. All right, so the code now requires existing buildings to achieve a certain number of additional efficiency credits noted in table R408. Additions must earn 5 credits, and substantial improvements, as defined as any repair, reconstruction, rehabilitation, alteration, or addition or other improvement or building or structure, the cost of which is equal to more than 50% of the market value of the structure before the improvement, must earn 3 credits, with exceptions for both. So this is the first time the Energy Code has added efficiency requirements for existing buildings that go beyond the scope of the prescriptive code requirements for new building components. So the code really does add in here some credits to meet the additional efficiency requirements, which will promote efficiency. As I noted, additions need to make 5 credits, and substantial improvements have to reach 3 credits. So now one other note here is for alterations, the code now points to the applicable section of new construction when any new building thermal envelope component or heating or cooling system is added, as outlined in the tables in this slide. So just a note for alterations, they just adjusted the requirements slightly where when you're making these changes, this is the section of the code to comply with. All right, so now to summarize everything we talked about today so we can get to some questions. As to wrap everything up, as we discussed in this presentation, the key point to remember are as follows. Unit sampling protocols have been added for air leakage, duct leakage, and ventilation system airflow testing. There are updated requirements for air leakage and duct leakage. The energy rating index is now better aligned with the HERS index. There's a new point-based credit system in R408 for prescriptive buildings. Existing building additions and substantial improvements are now required to achieve additional efficiency credits, and new optional appendices are available for adoption to help jurisdictions achieve their energy goals. So with that, we'll open the floor up to any questions. So Bill or Keegan, do we have any questions in the chat?
Nothing pertaining to the program at this time.
Okay. All right, I'm seeing one come in. All right, we'll just give it a few more minutes to see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to chime in here with them.
Okay, there are a couple just came in. When's the code available to purchase? Which should be available now on the ICC website, correct?
Yep, that's correct. So the code is available to purchase on iccsafe.org, I believe.
Yes.
Might be .com. And you can purchase it there. The free version, which is a web-only version, you can't copy any code language or do anything like that, is also available on their website. So you can purchase the code book with both a red line version showing changes between the 21 and the 24 IECC, along with a clean version with just the 24 IECC, now available from IECC, as well as the free version that is web-based online available there.
Okay, next question. What are townhouses considered?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I would say that reference the definitions outlined in the code in Chapter 2 for dwelling units. I can try to pull that up in the additional screen here, but for a specific requirement of what townhouses would be considered, I would just try to reference Chapter 2, see if there's a definition of townhouse, and see if it's included in the definition of dwelling unit.
Let's see. So what's the timing of Connecticut regarding adopting the 2024?
So yeah, I don't have a specific answer to that, but I would defer to ICF if you guys have anything. And if not, that's outside what we're expecting.
Yeah, no inside information on Connecticut's adoption schedule for the new code.
Okay, very good. How's the stretch code affected by the new energy code?
Yeah, that's a good question. The stretch code, so I don't know exactly how it is affected as of now. There might be some changes that are proposed to the stretch code when the code becomes available, but I do think that the additional efficiency options and appendices that are, or sorry, the additional appendices that are available might be used to, in the future, add some code language to the stretch code, potentially. I'm not speaking for the state or any code adoption authority here, but they do provide optional templates that are available for some good code language. So if you want enforceable model code language, I could see the this code being really good for that if you want to include it in the stretch code. But obviously I'm not representative of the state or of any code adoption body, so I can't speak to that, but just note there are language available to help support a stretch code there.
Would you, Keegan and Mike, would you be able to handle the rest of the questions? I have to jump for another presentation that I'm starting in about 5 minutes. So I apologize for that.
Sure.
I need to get over on that. And thank everybody for participating in today's event. And we'll be certain for those of you who had submitted questions and said that I will research that, I'll get you answers on those soon. So I need to go. I apologize.
Yep.
No
Thanks
worries,
so much,
Bill.
Bill.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, Michael, I can continue relaying these to you if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is the HERS rating even lower when supplemental power is added?
So I would say because when you add that additional power load, it does have a significant impact on the index. So for example, with the HERS rating, if you're adding in a certain size solar array, that'll drop the HERS index significantly. So the idea is that you want to make sure that you're not claiming credit for just putting a solar panel. They want to have a minimum level of actual efficiency upgrades you make before taking credit for the solar. So the reason they have that is if you're using solar or another on-site renewable energy system, you can't just you can't have very inefficient walls or like very not airtight. Like there has to be a certain level of efficiency you meet before and after factoring in solar. So just to make sure every other piece of the project is being very efficient. So you're not going to cut corners just by putting in a solar array. You have to look at what it would be before and after that solar array. Does that make sense?
I believe so.
Okay.
Is ResCheck updated with the 2024 building envelope requirements and required credits?
That I'm not sure of yet. As ResCheck is a DOE specific software, I think they're in the process of updating it. But I can't speak to that directly. I'm not fully sure.
And there's a question of how the code is applicable to renovations and additions. Does it apply to the overall building performance or only the new or renovated areas?
Yeah, so to that, I would say I believe it is only applicable to the new components that are added. So the code's only triggered when you're adding an envelope. There are specific requirements that are outlined for additions, alterations, repairs, and changes of use or occupancy. So when it comes to like additions or changes in that sense, I would reference the code for more specific information.
Great. Any other questions out there from folks in the audience? Okay, not seeing any others come in, so I think we can formally conclude today's presentation. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. And thank you again to the sponsors of Energize Connecticut for putting on this session and all the sessions part of this series. So keep an eye out for future announcements of trainings in this series, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Michael, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you all for your time today. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Yep, bye.